Hi everyone, this is Yasmin Taj from People Matters, and I welcome you all to an exciting interaction with gold standard women's leadership expert Sally Helgesen and coaching legend Marshall Goldsmith. Welcome, Sally. Welcome, Marshall.
Oh, it's so nice to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yasmin. Great to be here.
So, most of the behaviors that hold people back in their careers are gender neutral. But in today's marketplace, women face some specific and different challenges as they try to advance. Sally Helgesen and Marshall Goldsmith have each helped thousands of high achievers to reach greater heights and enjoy more satisfying careers. They know the unique strengths women bring to the table, but they have also watched common behaviors trip even the most talented women up. They have co authored How Women Rise, Break the 12 Habits Holding You Back from Your Next Raise, Promotion, or Job. Drawing on decades of stories and insights, Sally and Marshall have combined their expertise to identify the 12 most common habits that undermine women in their quest to become more successful and create careers that are satisfying and rewarding. So, Sally and Marshall, my first question to you is: you have identified 12 habits that you believe hold women back in their careers and in life in general. How did you develop the list?
I'd say we developed the list from my perspective. We each brought a lot to this book, but from my perspective, the behaviors are behaviors that I have watched or heard about in the last 15 years of doing women's leadership workshops all around the world. So listening to the stories of the women in the workshops, because they're very hands-on, interviewing women beforehand who are participating. These are the things I would constantly hear women most likely to struggle with. So from what I brought to the table, it really came from that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Sally really brought a wealth of experience and also doing research and interviews before her previous books as well. And as well as her research, I added some with my work in terms of teaching women's leadership programs. I'm usually one of the few men that's asked to teach in the women's leadership program. So I brought a little perspective. So we've had a great time working on this together.
Exactly. And I want to also point out that Marshall really brought the template or underlying idea of this book, which is that the same habits and behaviors that can serve you early in your career, those same habits and behaviors can start to get in your way as you move higher. And what we really sought to do was look at how that worked distinctively for women. So many of these habits and behaviors are positive things, and they're what got women to the point where they are now. But they're just things that may need adjustment, or you may need to think about if you really aspire to move to a higher position.
Okay, thanks. So, tell me one thing: are these habits universal in nature, or can there be some classification done on the basis of geographies, different cultures, societies?
In my experience, they're pretty consistent across cultures. As I said, my thinking on this evolved from doing workshops that I did from Kuala Lumpur to South Africa to Tromsø, Norway, way up above the Arctic Circle, not to mention, of course, the US and Canada. So I've really seen these pretty consistently play out. And there's something I want to make clear. I don't think that these habits and behaviors are female habits or behaviors. They are human habits and behaviors, just like the behaviors in What Got You Here Won't Get You There are as well. But they are the habits and behaviors most likely to get in women's ways, based on the kinds of experiences women have, based on the expectations that are often put on women or that they put on themselves.
And I've been to India about 40 times. I've taught many programs for women in India. So I find, if anything, these would be stronger here, more important here than in general, especially the ones about guilt and perfectionism.
So yes, please. So that brings me to the point: can these habits be changed and altered? Can women let go of these habits and advance in their careers?
Yes, and it's a very important point. That's the hints. This book started in reaction to my previous book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And what we found is a friend of ours wrote us a note and said, crazy idea. Why don't you take that concept, which really is more about male behavior, and talk about the specific elements that relate more to women. And for example, in our book, one of the things that really help you be successful is that drive for excellence in execution, that need to do perfect work. Well, that's okay if you're a worker. On the other hand, when you move up into management, you have to delegate, you have to let go, you have to quit being this technical perfectionist and start looking at a broader and broader perspective. Hence, what got you here to this level is not what's going to get you there to the next level.
Okay, thank you. And what role can an organization play in helping women change these habits?
Well, that's an interesting question. What we're really trying to focus on in this book is what women themselves can control.
Right.
Not changes in the culture, not changes in the structure, not what organizations can do. Our message is there's a lot you can do, a lot that is within your control. And I think that one of the reasons this book has found such an audience really worldwide is that we're not just, we don't just present a diagnosis. We don't just outline 12 behaviors and leave them lying there. We diagnose, we give some diagnosis with these 12 behaviors, then we present a really rich, useful, real world template that women can use to try to address these behaviors. Start with one thing. Don't get, maybe you'll say, oh, I identify with 4 of these behaviors, 5 of them. I've had women say I've identified with 9. Start with one thing and then enlist other people to help you. Get their responses. Say, I'm really trying to get better at being more concise in my presentations. When I go into this next meeting, would you watch and let me know what you think? Is there something I could do better? Or you could go to somebody who you notice is very concise in their presentations and say, what works for you? What kind of presentation, what kind of preparation you do to make sure that you're as concise as you are? So enlist other people, let them know you're trying to change. That way you're managing perception as well as behavioral change. So I think the book is very useful in that way with that kind of emphasis.
And one thing I've been very actually positively surprised by and happy is we've had virtually 0 political criticism in the book. I mean, normally you write a book about women, the left wing or the right wing or some wing is going to attack you. We've had virtually none of that. And I think the reason is, as Sally said, this book is not about what you can't change. It's not about politics. It's about what you can do. And I think that's one reason that we haven't received any negative feedback from either the right or left wing on this one. And what we say in the book is, we're not telling you you should want to achieve higher levels of authority or status in an organization. On the other hand, if you want to do a bigger job of influencing people, you need power. The definition of power is influence potential. You can't have influence potential and no influence potential at the same time. If you would like to have more potential to influence people in the world, we think this can help you do it. And I think that's one reason the book has been so well received and really hasn't gotten a lot of that negative political stuff that most women's books get.
I think that's really true, Marshall, that it's a very empowering kind of message. This is what you can do. And when we have had, I remember I appeared at a forum in Seattle, and the woman who was interviewing me said, I really object to the tone of your book because I think there's a lot organizations should be doing.
They should.
And you're letting them off the hook by focusing on what women need to do. And I thought, well, that's fine. I agree. Let somebody else write that book. This book is about what women themselves can do. And I think that's a very empowering kind of message to be able to take that control of your own career and your own destiny. And by the way, I believe I've been doing this 30 years. I've been in women's leadership, writing, speaking, doing workshops and development programs for 30 years. And I will tell you that the factor that is most likely to change organizations is when women in positions of leadership. So that's a good thing. And anything we can do to help women who wish to achieve leadership positions, if we can help them do that, that's going to be good for women, and it's going to be good for organizations and make them more adaptive to the future.
Absolutely agree. So one of the habits that you listed in your book is that the reluctance of women to talk about their achievements. Why do you think that reluctance is there, and what can be done about it?
Well, I think that reluctance to claim your achievements is really a foundational behavior that is problematic for a lot of women. And I think it goes to many sources. You're taught as a child, give other people credit, don't be obnoxious, don't boast, take a back seat. I remember going to a women's conference, a big international employer, and the women had a very hard time claiming their achievements. And yet the conference organizers had chosen as their theme, there is no I in team, trying even more to encourage the women to submerge their own ability to claim achievements. And guess what? This is considered a really nice behavior. And it's often a behavior that serves you well up to a certain level in your work, because people think of you as someone who's generous, someone who has an appropriate degree of humility. But as you assume a higher position and have greater authority and influence, you're really representing your organization. So if you're constantly giving away the credit and are unable to claim achievements, that's not doing any favor for the organization. So I've seen women really get into trouble there. They're heading up a big gala with a partner who's perhaps more powerful, and they're interviewed about their experience. They'll say, oh, working with him was wonderful. He was a great guy. He contributed so much. Then the man is interviewed. He'll say, oh, I'm a great guy. I did a great job. Well, guess what? He's representing his organization and you're representing yours. And if you can't talk about them, they're not going to be happy about that. So you really have to learn to get comfortable talking about what you've achieved if you're on a leadership path.
Great. So that brings me to the second point, which is why do women desire to be perfect, and can perfection ever be achieved?
Well, I find that Indian women, this is a special treat here. Indian women, in general, women, the average woman is seen as a better leader than the average man. This doesn't mean every woman is better than every man. It does mean statistically, with thousands of people, the average woman around the world gets better 360 feedback than the average man. This is not a theory, it's a fact. The average woman, and this is not a theory, it's a fact, has one issue to deal with much more than the average man. That is perfectionism and guilt. One coaching I have with women far more than men is, please quit being so hard on yourself. Please quit being so hard on yourself. Women statistically are harder on themselves than men are. And I find Indian women get double guilt. Not only do you get to be the perfect wife, mother, friend, boss, daughter, how about that perfect daughter-in-law? Oh, a little bonus treat for Indian women.
Absolutely. And there's something else. But one thing we learned in doing the book, there's research that shows that women in organizations tend to be rewarded for being precise and correct, whereas men are more likely to be rewarded for strategic thinking and risk-taking. So since women are rewarded for being precise and correct, right, they're going to act on the behaviors of precision and correctness, which is kind of putting you in the category of trying to be perfect at what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then one of the consequences of this is you do not develop that capacity for taking measured risk, because guess what? If you're trying to be perfect,
you can't fail.
You can't fail. So you better not take a risk, because risk and perfection don't go together. So by continuing a behavior that may have served you well early in your career, you're going to be penalized later.
And the extreme stereotype is this. Your boss gives you a job to do. You do a fantastic job. As a reward, what do you get? More. You do a fantastic job. What do you get then? More. Eventually, you become indispensable. What does that mean? You don't get promoted. You don't get promoted. As a recognition for all this perfectionism, what do you get? You get to stay where you are and keep doing the same job over and over again.
Yeah. It's a way of keeping yourself stuck. And in addition, perfectionism causes a lot of stress. Yeah. It causes stress on you, but it also causes stress on people around you. Mm-hmm. I've been doing this 30 years. Never once heard anybody say, I work for a perfectionistic boss and I love it. You create stress. So it's really time to think about letting perfectionism go.
So that my very interesting point comes to my mind here. So the workplace that probably came into existence hundreds of years ago was majorly led by men. It was created by men. So do you think it's all about the same perceptions and working systems coming from that era that have impacted the way women are perceived even today at the workplace?
Totally agree. I'm writing a new book called Stakeholder-Centered Leadership. Mm-hmm. That's my next book coming up. In that, I talk about the history of leadership and the future of leadership. The leader of the past did exhibit more typical male characteristics. In the cave, the leader was bigger and stronger, and it was the king until some young guy came along with a stick and pounded him over the head and became the new leader. The king was usually a man. Mm-hmm. The priest was a man. The master was a man. There was this male-dominated approach to leadership. Leadership in the past was directive, and men are seen as preferring this more directive style. The great Peter Drucker taught me, in the future, most of us will manage knowledge workers. A knowledge worker knows more than their boss does. Well, if I manage you and you know more than me, I can't just tell you what to do and how to do it. I have to ask, I have to listen, I have to learn, I have to be a facilitator. Women tend to be better at these skills, which are, by the way, skills that are more important for the leader of the future than they were important for the leader of the past.
That's exactly right. And I think that, one of the things that has really kept me going over the last 30 years has been to watch this extraordinary, unusual historical confluence whereby women are bringing into the workplace the very skills that the workplace needs as demographics, the nature of the economy, and above all, the technology shift. So you've got this enormous shift taking place, but here come women to supply many of the skills that are needed. So I think there's a strong overlap here. And for me, it's been a great source of optimism and confirmation for this work.
So what if women were there from the very beginning? How different would the workplace be?
I think it's hard to imagine what that would be. I really do, because a lot of the history of our planet has had to do with, particularly the history of war has had to do with how men play out dominance. And so I think that it would just be a very, very different place. But, we're going to get to test that out. Yeah. We are, if the planet survives, we are really going to get to test out what it looks like to live in a world where male and female roles, leadership styles, etc., are more similar rather than so different.
Mm-hmm. If you had to enlist 3 top challenges that women face at the workplace, especially when they're on the way to the top, what would they be?
Well, in terms of their behaviors, in terms of their own habits, I would say, number one, expecting others to spontaneously notice and value your contributions rather than bringing that to the fore yourself. Mm-hmm. I would say, as Marshall talks about a lot, putting your job before your career, not thinking with big enough intentionality about it.
Let me stop. That one has been a breakthrough for me. Mm-hmm. I never even heard of that concept before. Putting your job before your career, sacrificing your career before your job. Sally taught me this concept, and it's incredibly valuable. So many women identify with it. They get so focused on doing a perfect job, they're not investing in their long-term career. And what happens is, if you really think about it, if you do a perfect job where you are, that shows you're doing a perfect job where you are. That doesn't necessarily mean you're preparing yourself to go someplace else. And taking that time to get from that 95% to the 98 may not be worth it.
Yeah,
you can invest that time somewhere else, in the future, learning, growing, or building relationships. Another manifestation of this is women, more likely than men, fall in love with their work team. They fall in love with the team, therefore they don't want to take the lateral move. They don't want to take the promotion. They feel they will be abandoning their team. Well, that's okay if you want to manage your team. That's not okay if you want to get promoted. What you're doing is you're putting yourself in a box again. So that concept of sacrificing your career for your job is a concept I never thought of before. It's incredibly valuable. And when we work with women, they identify with this so often.
That's true. And a third thing, which I think just amplifies what Marshall said, is failing to build a big enough, robust enough, broad enough network of allies, not just people you have relationships with, but people who are invested in your career, you're invested in their career, so you've got that kind of give and take. Often I hear women say things like, I'm in a new job. I'm going to keep my head down for 6 months. I'm going to really learn this job. And then I'll look up and I'll start building the relationships I need. Guess what? It's too late already because you have cut yourself off at the knees for 6 months. It is such a contrast between what the outcome of that attitude will be and a guy who walks into a new job and his first question is, who do I need to know in order to make sure this job is a success? What's the result going to be for him? It's going to be more support. It's going to be more visibility, and it's going to be a lot less work. So the woman is putting herself under a lot more stress. So that's some of the behaviors that are in the book that are allied to that are making sure you build allies from day one and also learning to leverage, not just build relationships. So all those things are really important. They serve visibility. They serve, they make your work less stressful, and they make it more likely that you'll position yourself really to move up rather than just get stuck doing a perfect job of what you're doing.
Great, thank you. So my next question is, are there any names that come to your mind in terms of organizations that have really cracked it when it comes to helping women rise? Could be globally, could be India, could be Southeast Asia specifically.
Our real expertise is not focusing on what organizations do. So I would rather just say I'm not an expert on that question. We are focused more on what the individual can do.
Okay, I agree with that, and that's the way I prefer to answer that, because it's so much what the book is about. Here's what the individual can do, rather than the organization, the HR solution.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. So also one more thing that we've spoken to a lot of CEOs, and everybody says diversity is on top of their mind and is a huge priority for them. When it comes to running business at the end, somehow diversity is not prioritized. It becomes second,
Right.
So how do you think we can change that?
Well, again, I'm not an expert on how organizations can change. But one thing I do know, which is that research shows that even though senior leaders will say that diversity is a priority for them, that when it comes to where they spend their time, it's not really true. And one of the things that always fascinates me is the extent to which generic research on the importance and value of diversity does not really land on leaders. McKinsey's been doing these Women Matters reports since, I think, 2004. They're spectacularly rich and full of information about the value that women bring to organizations. But when you will talk to, say, the head of a law firm and say, McKinsey researcher, somebody says, well, that's McKinsey. Our culture is different. Can you demonstrate how this would work in our culture? Well, my answer is not really. That's your job. Your job is to understand how that would work in your culture. And that's where I see organizations to some degree passing the buck. They want custom solutions that work for them, but they're not willing to undertake the real hard work of doing that. So I think they fall down and they end up with not having really, really strong motivations. I can give you a very quick example. I worked with a huge global energy company. It was headquartered in Australia, and they developed this fierce commitment toward trying to maximize diversity, and especially women. And what I learned was fascinating. They did a huge internal survey, and what they found was that the record of safety at every mining or metal or oil producing site they had worldwide, the record of safety was directly correlated to how inclusive the employee perceptions were at that site. Now that gives you a very serious motivation to think about diversity and inclusion, because it goes so much to your bottom line, your safety record. So they were able to make that commitment from a place of real passion, because it was a very customized solution. But that's what really begins to turn things around, not just reading a report about, done by an organization that talks about it generally.
Our philosophy on this is very simple. We're not going to solve societal problems. We're not going to solve most organizational problems. Our view is this: if you really want to have more gender diversity, get more women at the top. And the more women you have at the top, you don't have to sell it. If a woman is a CEO, you don't have to sell her on the value of women. What we're trying to do is help more women get to the top. Very, very simply, that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to change the world in terms of organizations or HR structures. We're trying to provide guidelines to help more women get to the top with what they can control. And by the way, I'm often asked by women, I'm in this organization where there's just no hope. You know what I tell them? Leave. Now, don't cut off your nose to spite your face.
Right.
Wait till you get a better job. Start looking for a job now and get out. By the way, if enough good women get out, those problems start going away. So I encourage women, look, you do what you can do. If the company gives you a fair chance, go for it. If they don't give you a fair chance, get out and go someplace else.
Great. So that brings me to the final question now. So we've spoken about habits that limit a woman's growth. What about habits that will help women rise?
Well, I think one of the primary habits that help women rise is to be very attentive to how visible you are and how visible your contributions are from the very beginning. And don't wait until you feel like you have your job completely mastered to do that. Begin to think about visibility, begin to think about marketing what you do, begin to think about tying that to what the organization's ultimate mission and purpose in the future is. Develop a way to really articulate it quickly and clearly. I think that's one of the strongest things women can do to help themselves rise.
And my mind is one of the things we talk about in the book. Many women have this misguided belief: my good work should speak for itself. It's as if somehow God is going to fly out of the sky and recognize you for your good work. I doubt it. God might have better things to do this week than that, right? Probably not going to happen. If that were true, no company would need a marketing function. My good work should speak for itself. Why have a marketing function? Just do good work and they'll line up to buy it. Well, you have to be your own marketing function. You can't wait on God to take care of you. You can't wait on the rest of the world to take care of you. And by the way, the guy sitting next to you, he's not waiting for God. He's out there selling himself. So in the new world, as Sally said, you're your own marketing function. So what we try to do is give you some simple guidelines to do an effective job of that.
And to do it in a way you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
I mean, often I'll hear women say, well, if I have to act like that jerk down the hall in order to get noticed around here, no, thank you. Guess what? You don't. That's not the only way to bring attention to what you do. So find something that you're comfortable with and make that work.
Great. I think that was some awesome insights from your side. Thank you so much for your time, and look forward to hearing you again and, more insights, and look forward to more books And thank you so much once again for your time. Pleasure, both of you, Sally and Marshall. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.